berserk. And if he ever goes berserk, I know I can outrun him. Shady. And if that means I have to do something shady. Influential. And influential couples of the 20th century? Prism. And interpret the results through the competing academic prisms. Heighten. And it doesn't help that I've got this heightened sense of smell. Objectify. And it doesn't objectify or stereotype women. Means. And it is by no means a dead end. Reconstruct. And it still managed to reconstruct it. Wildlife. And it's starting to attract wildlife. Oblivion. And just pile drive you into oblivion. Incisor. And lateral incisors are significantly smaller. Invulnerable. And leaves the invulnerable Kryptonian fabric unharmed and daisy fresh. Unharmed. And leaves the invulnerable Kryptonian fabric unharmed and daisy fresh. Vascular. And localized vascular throbbing. Throbbing. And localized vascular throbbing. Felon. And maybe a felon. Valet. And maybe a few bucks for the valet. Selfless. And maybe a little turned on about how selfless I'm being. Lattice. And model the lattice. Cedar. And my allergies. One kiss would put me in Cedar Sinai for a week. Uniformity. And my favorite ingredient of all. Uniformity. Mythological. And mythological. Contort. And naked bodies contorted in the sweet agony of coitus. Agony. And naked bodies contorted in the sweet agony of coitus. Vector. And non-relativistic vectors in the same equation. Duchy. And not just a regular duchy. On stage. And not just Harry. Everyone on stage. Cavort. And now they're cavorting at the base of my hair follicles. Saturate. And one of saturated potassium iodide. Potassium. And one of saturated potassium iodide. Caucus. And other assorted caucuses. Petroleum. And petroleum jelly. The worst tasting jelly. Worst. And petroleum jelly. The worst tasting jelly. Bibliography. And properly note them in our bibliography. YouTube. And put it on YouTube. Misery. And put me out of my misery. Uncomfortably. And reaching up into the machine uncomfortably intimate. Aloud. And read it aloud for the first time. Unchain. And run to Santa to unchain him. Solace. And seek solace in the arms of a heavily muscled longshoreman. Revere. And she has a very unique way of, revering me. Grocer. And she said she knew about 4 Chinese grocers. Slosh. And sloshes all over her patio. Patio. And sloshes all over her patio. Modeling. And some little 3D modeling. Varicose. And someday, when you have varicose veins. Apricot. And someone polished off the apricot yogurt. Mime. And somewhere there's a mime who's top in his field. Refresher. And take a refresher course in CPR. Wicked. And take a wicked whiz. Overshadow. And thankfully, their embarrassment was overshadowed. Heated. And thanks to Sheldon's heated discussion. Frill. And that'll have to be no frills. Effortless. And that's how you make effort look effortless. Glaze. And that's served with a teriyaki glaze and sticky rice. Boredom. And that, Charlie Brown, is what boredom is all about. Ambulatory. And the ambulatory speed of a sick Sheldon. Womankind. And the apparent collective decision of all womankind. Viper. And the blue viper is being operated. Checkout. And the checkout lady asked when I was due. Lustrous. And the glial cells more lustrous. Measuring. And the last one there has to do the measuring. Imperfection. And the only way to do that is to introduce imperfection. Subsequent. And the subsequent birth of a child who will destroy humanity. Unremarkable. And the unremarkable alike. Receiver. And the X10 receiver attached to this. Angrily. And then angrily slamming it behind me. Critique. And then broke off into focus groups and critique each other. Pastor. And then call her pastor to pray for Missy's soul. Desecrate. and then desecrates one of Ethan Allen's finest sofas. Disguise, and then fought crime disguised as man-bat, motionless, and then I make hot, motionless love to you, reshape, and then you came along and reshaped him, Afghan, and there is an Afghan over my head, innuendo, and there was a handshake loaded with sexual innuendo. Adage, and there's the vulgar adage, established, and third, it's not news, it's well established, Titanic, and this is me doing the Titanic pose on the boat, recur, and this recurring thing on a soap, spectrometer, and time of flight mass spectrometer. Forbidden, and to her I'm a forbidden piece of white chocolate, memorialize, and to memorialize this occasion, elongation, and tonight Mercury is at its highest elongation, continent, and transferred across the continent, groundwork, and tried to lay some groundwork for you? Beat, and red stool from beats leads to cancer scare, thermal, and we had to get physicals and buy thermal underwear, rocker, and we pray that you help Sheldon get back on his rocker, beneficial, and we think it'd be beneficial, sewer, and went down a sewer grate. Great, and went down a sewer grate, hallucination, and went to the post-mortem, neuron-induced hallucination, excitation, and what we do have I need for my quantum excitation study, skunk, and when they're drunk as a skunk, dysentery, and when you pick a chance card, you might die of dysentery. Frolic, and who is that Japanese feline I see frolicking on your shorts? Wishful, and wishful thinking, coloring, and wishing you had a coloring book, tinge, and with a tinge of sadness that I'm no longer in your life, cleverly, and yes, that is a cleverly veiled reference. Secretive, and you are exhibiting the same secretive behavioral tics, corridor, and you discover a secret door leading to a dark corridor, pulverize, and you pulverize them with a 12-gauge shotgun, streak, and you thought it was a fuzzy streak, succinct, and you wish I'd be more succinct. Inorganic, and you're an inorganic adhesive, bum, and you're kind of bumming everybody out, artery, and your carotid artery is just one shaky scalpel away, scalpel, and your carotid artery is just one shaky scalpel away, droop, and your penis would droop like a willow tree. Petulant, and your petulant refusal, helper, and, one day, cybernetically enhanced helper monkeys, makeshift, and, fashioned it into a makeshift shoe, revoke, and, since you didn't exercise your right to revoke, livelihood, and, your livelihood is dependent. Detachment, and, treat her with, like, cool detachment, anecdotal evidence suggests, indefinitely, angular momentum indefinitely, glucose, an electromyogram, a CBC, baseline glucose, usage, another accepted usage for the term hoe. Epaulette, another fascinating example is the epaulette, equalizer, another great equalizer, piracy, another reason to consider life of piracy, anticipated activity spectrum, alteration, any alterations except for breaking news. Unsuitable, any chance you find them cold, cruel and unsuitable, counterproductive, any counterproductive grumbling must be skillfully, any counterproductive grumbling must be skillfully, mango, any mango sticky rice, California, anyway, she called me up, and she's like, hey, how's California? Genocide, apocalyptic genocide and go easy on the cologne, forego, applaud Raj's decision to forego emotional attachment, embed, are actually strings embedded in multidimensional space-time, await, are just a few of the 1,000+ horrors that await, misfire, are misfiring neurons in your hippocampus preventing the conversion. Conversion, Are misfiring neurons in your hippocampus preventing the conversion? Toothpick. Are my favorite toothpick delivered meatball. Corrosion. Are susceptible to pinholes and corrosion. Team. Are teeming with drunken sailors and alley cats. Inoculation. Are we all up to date on our yellow fever inoculations? Jettison. Are we clear to jettison that nightgown? Nightgown. Are we clear to jettison that nightgown? District. Are we in a good school district? Dehydration. Are you experiencing dehydration? Headache. Nutritional. Are you experimenting with nutritional suppositories again? Tier. Are you making this a Tier 1 friendship request? Circadian. Are you monitoring your circadian rhythms? Sane. Are you sane? Beside. Are you saying that you will not stand beside me? Corporation. Are you suggesting a limited liability corporation? Bout. Are you suggesting another bout of stress release? Secondhand. Aren't you worried about secondhand smoke? Revolve. Around which revolves my entire universe. Thistle. Artichoke, come on, people. It's just a giant thistle. Fetish. Artificial intelligences do not have teen fetishes. Accessible. Artsy, but accessible than light petting. No coitus. Icebreaker. As a conversational icebreaker? Numerous. As I've stated before on numerous occasions. Continuous. As one continuous flexible piece. Evident. As should be evident by this sport coat. Airspace. As soon as she flies into California airspace. Preconception. As they challenge the preconceptions of their fields. Custody. As to who gets custody of the TV. Diplomacy. As you know, the essence of diplomacy is compromise. Soliloquy. As your door-knocking soliloquy? Horrified. Horrified? Afflict. Assuming one is afflicted with such. Housing. At a housing project in Rosemead. Timid. At all timid. Turncoat. At best you might be a turncoat Ewok. Oxen. At least 2 oxen and a goose. Nonverbal. At sensing nonverbal cues. Plantation. At soup plantation. It's creamy tomato soup day. Creamy. At soup plantation. It's creamy tomato soup day. Geography. At that point, based on the geography of the apartment. Ecosystem. At this point, in our ecosystem, you are akin to the plover. ATM. ATMs will lead the charge. Shopper. Attention all shoppers. Australia. Australia. Mate. Authorized. Authorized personnel only. Personnel. Authorized personnel only. Expulsion. Available for violent expulsion. Presumption. Avoid the presumption of the Terran sensory input paradigm. Turbine. Avoids the spinning turbine. Brook. Babbling brooks. Constitutional. Based on a constitutional or statutory issue. Statutory. Based on a constitutional or statutory issue. Wholesale. Based on your wholesale selling price. Precursor. Be a precursor to an impromptu invitation to come in and chat. Ruthless. Be ruthless. Affluence. Beauty because their girth suggested affluence. Midwestern. Because her face is overly Midwestern. Technicality. Because I do love a legal technicality. Concrete. Because I hadn't offered any concrete suggestions for pursuing our friendship. Mill. Because I saw a sad man with a pepper mill. Continuously. Because I talk about you continuously. Frigid. Because in the frigid temperatures in the Arctic. Immaculate. Because it was immaculate. Sire. Because men can sire offspring their entire lives. Dusky. Because now I'm the dusky half of Kuthrapani. Enriched. Because Santa wouldn't bring him enriched uranium. Irregularly. Because the crown was irregularly shaped. Disrepute. Because the word secretary has fallen into disrepute. Clog. Because you clogged up her bathroom. Expectant. Because you're an expectant mother. You can't drink alcohol. glowing, because you're old and glowing. Beekeeper, beekeeper to king 12. Cooked, been a long time since I had a home-cooked meal. Beeswax, beeswax, none of your broach, before I could broach the subject. Pontificate, before I knew it, he pontificated his way. Stubble, before I see Amy's leg stubble in my shower. Alga, before you can ride an alga thingy. Armored, behind the wheel of an up-armored Humvee. Lumber, being crushed under a pile of lumber. Dispatch, being dispatched for dissection. Penalize, being penalized with the loss of a down. Belgian, Belgian ambulance. Morality, believed that morality is just a fiction. Saucy, Bernadette's diary has some saucy passages. Microbe, bird is studying the way microbes in rocks. Disrupt, besides disrupting the local gravity field. Shortness, besides shortness. Catheter, bifocals and the flexible urinary catheter. Bifurcate, bifurcated uvula. Sheldon. Bittersweet, bittersweet. Boone, boon or otherwise. Amphitheater, Boone has hosted an outdoor amphitheater portrayal. Petite, bother to create a petite, hot, 17-year-old killer robot. Painkiller, boy, I'm gonna miss these painkillers. Bony, bring him to his bony knees. Spaceman, bring it in. Spaceman, you've been cleared for landing. Tally, brought my coital tally up to 4. Businessman, businessmen, high-end prostitutes. Gnawing, but all I feel is this gnawing, empty sensation in my gut. Nonsensical, but also stands alongside such other nonsensical queries. Timetable, but based on NASA's latest timetable. Rancher, but certainly not avocado rancher. Unlock, but do me a favor and unlock the liquor cabinet first. Starchy, but do not give her anything starchy. Paralysis, but first, I cast a spell of paralysis on Stewart and Howard. Backstroke, but he can do the backstroke in a toilet bowl. Unstable, but he seemed a bit emotionally unstable. Quantitative, but how do we apply quantitative metrics? Distressed, but I am a bit distressed to be in a vehicle. Digress, but I digress. Unanticipated, but I experienced an unanticipated. Irresistible, but I find that topic irresistible. So, heritage, but I guess our rich heritage means nothing to you. Hangover, but I have a cream sherry hangover. Foolproof, but I have devised a foolproof plan. Touchy, but I know it's kind of a touchy subject. Contradiction, it's the only way to settle the contradictions. Mindless, but I realize now, you want the mindless nattering. Hem, but I still need to get all my pants hemmed. Amendment, but I tacked so many amendments on that thing. Enhancement, but I think the end result will be a measurable enhancement. Brat, but I was a Navy brat, so I was. Insinuate, but I was about to insinuate. Unlucky, but I was unlucky. Beeline, but I'm gonna make a beeline for the place. Shrill, but if you could maybe just go 10% less shrill. Purity, but in 1487, the Bavarian purity laws. Heterosexual, but in separate, heterosexual bedrooms. Disclosure, but in the interest of full disclosure. Skier, but it turns out he's a black diamond skier. Matching, but it's not a dinosaur fossil or matching pocket watches. Bamboo, but it's stuck inside this bamboo puzzle box. Razor, but a Cam's razor. Sofa, but of the two of us, you're clearly more sofa-sized. Accustomed, but over time, you'll grow accustomed. Lofty, but perhaps from your lofty heights. Bending, but rather on the shape of the buttocks of a female bending over. Algebra, but removing the limitations of obeying the Poincare algebra. Twiddle, but since my cerebral cortex is twiddling its proverbial thumbs. Figurative, but that is the figurative you, not the literal you. Pleasurable, But that was a very pleasurable 139.5 hours. Ploy. But that was just a ploy. Telling. But the doc says there's no telling. Incorporate. But the idea that you might be able to incorporate gravity. Caregiver. But the lawsuit from his Jamaican caregiver. Pollen. But their dance lets other bees know where the pollen is. Inevitably. But then I'd inevitably spend the whole day. Theoretically. But theoretically, if you and I. Stimulating. But they turned out to be much too stimulating. Earmark. But this money is earmarked for scones. Accusation. But to face the crying, angry accusations. Tread. But tread carefully because it may be the last conversation we ever have. Contemplation. But upon contemplation. Biochemistry. But we both understand the biochemistry of sex. Ferry. But we could take the ferry out to Catalina. Envelop. But we finally found a dress that could envelop your mother. Creek. But what about the creek bed? Sideline. But you are wrong to keep me on the sidelines. 30. But your 30s are almost over. Indecipherable. But your opinion left the most indecipherable invitation. Conversely. But. Conversely. I think. Get in. Trepidation. But. You understand my trepidation. Canon. But. A canon? Homeopathic. Buying homeopathic medicine, you love that. Enterprising. By an enterprising young man. Assessment. By discussing your assessment. Impregnate. By having women impregnated by gorillas. Liken. By likening it to the Flash playing tennis with himself. Bruges. By now, you'd have my great-aunt Ida's Bruges. Comparatively. By someone as comparatively workaday as your son? Craze. By that sex-crazed gorilla. Carving. By the carving of giant wooden phalluses. Cooling. By the rapid cooling of magnesium and iron-rich lava. Soluble. By water-soluble aliens. Fax. Call this number and we'll fax you a copy of the report. Macroscopic. Can be achieved by creating a macroscopic example. Oblivious. Can be painfully oblivious to social cues. Conjunction. Can be taken in conjunction with other medications. Geographic. Can have the qualities of a geographic location. Unpredictable. Can lead to a cataclysmic and unpredictable result. Designation. Can we at least give it a secret code designation? Babble. Can you please keep the Bible babble to yourself? Perspire. Can you tell I'm perspiring a little? Chairman. Can't you take this up with your department chairman? Candid. Candid truth-telling from your employees. Apparel. Cats, however, refuse to wear sporting apparel. Mobility. Caused by the mobility of ions in the water. Soviet. Check out this sexy number from the former Soviet Union. Broth. Chicken broth. Chronicle. Chronicles. Clash. Clash of the Titans right before you went to bed. Classy. Classy dog. Febrile. Clearly. Febrile delirium is setting in. Delirium. Clearly. Febrile delirium is setting in. Celebratory. Clinking of glasses. And celebratory gunfire. Clutch. Clutching that Nobel Prize. Radioactivity. Co-discoverer of radioactivity. Coincidentally. Coincidentally. That's also why I chose you as a roommate. Complement. Colors that complement her skin tone. Corrode. Combined with electricity will corrode the lug nut off. Tracking. Combined with laser-based finger tracking. Glioblastoma. Come on. Tumor. Mama needs an aggressive little glioblastoma. Commence. Commence Operation Priya wouldn't wanna be ya. Lasso. Complete with bulletproof bracelets and lasso of truth. Consequently. Consequently. If Amy and I choose. Intervene. Convention that requires you to intervene at all. Silo. Converting it into a missile silo. Coup. Coup and Rolling Thunder are together again. Resort. Cooper and Hofstadter resorting to juvenile attempts at humor. Merger. Corporate merger. Hyperplasia. Could be a symptom of benign prostatic hyperplasia. Construe. Could be construed as offensive. Tomb. Could either be creepy like a mummy's tomb. Unscrew. Could make a big green hand that unscrews it. Saltiness. Crispiness. Saltiness and shape. Taunt. Cruel taunt in the Sudan. Culminate. Culminating in second base. Quizzical. Curriculum had rendered you quizzical. Livable. Daddy needs a livable planet he can rule with an iron fist. Retention. Damaged plastic retention hub number 3. Crisp. Deep and crisp and even. Diver. Deep sea divers holding their breath for several minutes. Degenerate. Degenerate carnival folk. Carnival. Degenerate carnival folk. Handbook. Department of Motor Vehicles new driver handbook. Dereliction. Dereliction of duty in the face of the enemy is. Strengthen. Designed to strengthen my cardiovascular system. Cardiovascular. Designed to strengthen my cardiovascular system. Productivity. Designito increase productivity. Aerosol. Despite my deep love of CHIS, lasers and aerosol disinfectant. Determined. Determined to bend me over and give me a scoliosis test. Crystallize. Diamonds. Crystallized carbon. Moonlight. Did Alexander Fleming moonlight as a hairdresser? Hairdresser. Did Alexander Fleming moonlight as a hairdresser? Autobiography. Did he finally write a sequel to his autobiography? Abysmal. Did her abysmal housekeeping skills. Contrast. Did you change the contrast or brightness settings on the television? Memo. Did you guys see the new budget memo that went out this morning? Greenhouse. Did you hear about the light-splitting greenhouse film? Transcontinental. Did you know that when you fly transcontinental without your wife? Shellfish. Did you know they served shellfish and eel? Postgraduate. Didn't have a postgraduate degree. Penniless. Didn't Tesla die penniless? Forgotten and insane? Monoxide. Died in a horrific carbon monoxide accident. Differentiate. Differentiate under the integral sign. Disintegrate. Disintegrated in order to create a new Sheldon. Ripple. I want to see his cheeks ripple. Dosage. Do not adjust the dosage. Plume. Do we know if there's life in the methane plumes of Enceladus? Recollect. Do you happen to recollect if I left a notebook? Qualm. Do you have any ethical qualms regarding human experimentation? Suspender. Do you own a barrel and suspenders? Realistically. Do you realistically see any conversational path that would take me from? Transcribe. Do you really need me to transcribe this? Flourish. Do you suppose you would have flourished more? Ambivalent. Do you think a sexually ambivalent Indian astrophysicist? Syringe. Do you think he'd let me draw a syringe full of his blood? Jarring. Do you think that might be jarring? Hinder. Do you think this possibility will be helped or hindered? Hinduism. Does everything you know about Hinduism come from Indiana Jones? Unpopular. Does the study say what happens to the unpopular kids? Automatically. Doesn't automatically mean that I'm spoiled. Delusional. Doesn't mean I'm delusional. Underlying. Doesn't mean my underlying point was invalid. Melodramatic. Don't be melodramatic. Sonorous. My voice is deep and sonorous. Baldness. Don't forget the male pattern baldness. Pathology. Don't take it personally. It's his pathology. Tug. Don't tug. Yap. Don't yap. Misquote. Don't you misquote Spider-Man to me. Bribe. Don't you think they're gonna realize it's just a bribe? Abstain. Dr. Sheldon Cooper promises to abstain from all insulting or panther. Drinking wine. Riding panthers. Dripping. Dripping faucets. Faucet. Dripping faucets. Mechanized. Drive a 110 pounds of mechanized death. Imperialist. Dude, that movie's an imperialist fantasy. Duly noted. Steve from Wichita. E.g. depression, anxiety, etc. Ambassador. Each and every one of you is an ambassador for Amy and myself. Daunting. Each more daunting than the last. Uncover each other questions to uncover clues. Organically. Earlier tonight, things began organically. Pedigree. Educational pedigree. Scientific field. Barefoot. That just means going barefoot. Emigrate. Emigrate to another country that's willing to accept him. Encapsulate. Encapsulates all my negative emotions. Encryption. Encryption systems are built on prime numbers. Endowment. Endowment is disproportionate to my physical stature. Engulf. Engulfing the city in flames. Partition. Enough room on a hard drive for a Linux partition. Enumerate. Enumerates. Iterates and codifies. Iterate. Enumerates. Iterates and codifies. Eczema. Especially if you have moderate to severe eczema. Ethically. Ethically murky on your behalf. Murky. Ethically murky on your behalf. Stocky. Even you. With your stocky build and lumberjack shoulders. Lumberjack. Even you. With your stocky build and lumberjack shoulders. Beak. Eventually one of them would evolve a different beak shape. Formative. Every aspect of his formative years. Awaken. Every Saturday since we've lived in this apartment I have awakened at 6:15. Sidetrack. Every time we get sidetracked. Diversity. Everybody knows genetic diversity produces the strongest offspring. Evidently. Evidently. Tablespoon. Exactly 2 tablespoons of Pepto right now. Exile. Exiled to the elbow of the staircase. Staircase. Exiled to the elbow of the staircase. Carbonate. Exposed to a sodium carbonate solution. Sardonic. Exposed to the sardonic barb of my cousin Sanjay. Barb. Exposed to the sardonic barb of my cousin Sanjay. Expound. Expounding the discredited Velikovsky hypothesis. Invincible. Fantastic Four Daredevil Invincible Iron Man. Electrolyte. Feed him an electrolyte solution. Fester. Festering in every nook and cranny of this hospital. 15 years old. Independence. Financial independence. Abide. Fine. We'll abide by the Geneva Convention. Adaptable. I'm nothing if not adaptable. Quake. Firequake. Extraction. Fit comfortably in my mouth without need of extraction. Thorny. 5 thorny crowns. Nab. 5, 4, 3. This is my moment. Dagnabbit. Endocrine. Follow your endocrine system. Ubiquitous. Football is ubiquitous in Texas. Debut. Footprints on the moon made their debut. Handcrafted. For a handcrafted Harry Potter wand. Repentance. For a session of self-criticism and repentance. Infraction. For all your infractions and must pay all fines. Stingy. For being stingy with the peas couldn't keep her hands off you. Transposition. For cross-sensory transposition? Aback. For example, I'm sure he'd be delightfully taken aback. Cobblestone. For Halloween, we can dress him as a cobblestone. Equitable. For its equitable distribution. Bovine. For my research on bovine spongiform encephalopathy. Elective. For never having gotten his nose mutilated with elective surgery. Discrepancy. For some of the discrepancies found in Hubble's constant. Daffodil. For taking daffodils to your unicorn. Measly. For 2 measly points. Throwing the game. Policewoman. For you telling the policewoman. Disassemble. For your convenience. I disassemble into 4 pieces. Domestic. Foreign. Domestic. Experimental. Adept. Forgive me. As you know, I'm no adept at reading facial cues. Savvy. Fortunately. Thanks to computer-savvy alcoholics. Seashell. Found a seashell. Optimistically. Found traditionally in the optimistically named funny pages. Suffice. 4 dozen should suffice. Brevity. 4 from what I gather. Brevity is your friend. Pavement. Frankly, if he really loved her, he'd let her hit the pavement. Fraternal. Fraternal twins come from 2 separate eggs. Dramatically. Frequent coitus dramatically increases the odds of fertilization. Noncommittal. Friendly. Noncommittal. Lapse. Friends overlook each other's minor lapses. Predatory. From a predatory alien race. Unjustified. From achieving REM sleep was entirely unjustified. Unguent. From my lotion and unguent collection. Monk. From now on, I'm a monk. Assertion. From now on, when I make an assertion. Supernovous. From quantum particles to supernovous. Raucous. From raucous laughter. Ignorant. From the ignorant backwoods of East Texas. Disney. From the Imagineers over at Disney. Intercom. From the intercom. Malevolent. From the malevolent mind of Sheldon Cooper.